because that's not something that I'm very good at all. It's really a pleasure to be here today. First of all, this is awesome. Look at this room. And what I'm told is that there's a waiting list almost as large as this room to be able to come to this conference. So South Carolina, give yourselves a round of applause. My name is Vito Borrello. I don't need to go through my bio, as you've heard every single word of it. All to say that I've been in this work in family engagement since 1995. That's a long time, right? 28 years in this work that's been really not only my profession, but a labor of love. I want to start off by thanking the South Carolina Department of Education. Give them a round of applause. Superintendent Ellen Weaver, Deputy Superintendent Laura Bain, who I understand is going to be here today. Certainly Regina Thurman, Don Doggett of the Serve Comprehensive Center, and all of the summit organizers. If the summit organizers could stand, I'd really appreciate that. They've done an amazing job. Okay. So I was here, it's great to be back here. I was actually here 5 years ago, and we're going to get into this a little bit later, on May 18th of 2018, when we were bringing together a diverse group of people, I believe in this very center, to co-develop a family engagement framework. So I'm just curious, was anybody here then? Does anyone remember co-designing? Stand if you were here, I'm just curious. Who was here to co-design the family engagement framework for South Carolina in 2018? A couple people are, give yourself a round of applause. I want to recognize a couple of people. So back then, I was providing technical assistance directly to South Carolina. We had a group of people, a terrific team here, who was thinking with us about the South Carolina Family Engagement Framework, and a couple of them are here today. So I want to just recognize Wendy Burgess and Aileen Hanna. Please stand. They were two of the three-person team. Yolanda Anderson was also part of it, I think Tracy Sweet. Back then, Molly Spearman, who was supporting the whole effort as the superintendent of South Carolina. We'll talk more about that, but that's really where this all began, was 5 years ago. So to come back 5 years later and see this room and see this energy is just really, really rewarding. And it started with those people. So, and then it expanded. So when we started with the framework, then we got involved in, and you're going to hear about this, educator preparation, and we put together a pre-service consortium. And South Carolina is leading the way, I want to say. You're going to hear about that, but I want to recognize a couple of people who were part of our team. Only 7 states were selected. This was an application process to work on this consortium. Only 7 states were selected. I think we had 15 or 20 that wanted to be a part of this. We selected South Carolina. And I'd like to just ask to stand James Ritter. Is Anthony Pittman here? James Ritter is with the South Carolina Department of Ed. Anthony Pittman is the Dean of Education at Claflin University. And Michelle Myers, who's now at Wake Forest, was with the University of South Carolina. They were a key part of our team. And then finally, the Carolina Family Engagement Center. There were, at the time, only 12 statewide family engagement centers that were selected from across the country. One of those is here in South Carolina at the University of South Carolina, led by Karen Utter. Karen, are you here? If you could stand. So there's a lot happening in South Carolina. You all need to know that if you don't. And I'm going to tell you, if you don't, you're going to learn more about that. I'd like to get a sense of who is in the room here. So first, school district staff. Raise your hand if you're here. Okay. How about parent leaders? Okay, in the back of the room. There you are. Excellent. How about South Carolina Department of Ed staff? Okay. How about community-based organizations or after-school organizations? My friend Phil from National PTA, thank you. How about early childhood? Okay, a few people from early childhood. Higher ed? And other, whoever missed, researchers, policymakers. Excellent. Thank you. So I'm putting sorry about that. Here we are. So I'm going to put a lot into this presentation. I didn't want to just come here and give you a message, although that's important enough. We have a room full of people here, and we are creating a movement for family engagement and education across the country. And so beyond, in addition to providing a message, hopefully a message that is inspiring, this is a quasi-training a little bit, because I really want to share some knowledge with you and resources with you that you can utilize hopefully going forward in advancing this work and continuing to build this movement. But our objectives for today are to explore 4 challenges in the field of family and community engagement, creating the conditions to address those challenges, which is really what NAFSCE is all about, and then the opportunities in South Carolina to advance authentic family engagement. So this is how we define family engagement. Is a shared responsibility among families, schools, and communities to support student learning. Families guide, support, and advocate for student learning, and schools and communities reach out to neighborhood families and build relationships, help reinforce families' goals, and co-construct practices and policies together. And here's your definition. This was all part of the framework development 5 years ago. Families are actively involved in the learning and development of all students to become college and career ready. And I think we know this, but for so long, family engagement was sort of off to the corner, right? We do all these other education strategies, and then we should do family engagement because it's kind of the right thing to do. It's good public relations. No, the research is really clear about this. When we advance effective family, school, and community engagement, everyone wins. Students win through improved school readiness and higher student achievement and better behavior in school. Teachers win. The research is clear about this now more than ever around increased job satisfaction and the reduced likelihood of leaving the profession. This is a real problem right now. Teachers are leaving the profession. What is one of the main reasons why? They don't feel that they have satisfactory relationships with families and their community. And with some of the political issues, that's just fueled the fire instead of really helped to bring parents and teachers together, which, by the way, the research is clear about. It's not about dividing parents and teachers and some of these things that we're hearing. It is about teachers and parents working together. So I think all of us need to be advancing that. Families win. They're better leaders. They're better advocates for their children when they're involved in their children's education and they're working with teachers and school staff. And by the way, when we do all of those things, and if we're doing family engagement well, which is meeting families where they are, figuratively and literally, we are advancing equity. Opportunity for all. That's what, we don't have to talk a lot about equity, but we can talk about this. It's opportunity for all. I'm going to get into that with some of the research. So a little bit about NAFSCE. As you heard, we were founded in 2014. There was never an association whose sole focus was the advancement of family, school, and community engagement, really a professional membership association, advancing the work of all of you. And so it was really clear that needed to happen. And in 2014, actually over even a couple of years prior to that, people said we have to create this organization. Our mission is to advance high-impact family, school, and community engagement policies and practices to promote child development, student achievement, and school improvement. But our vision is really what inspires me. And there are a couple of phrases in here that we know we're not there yet. A world where family engagement is universally practiced as an essential strategy for improving children's learning and advancing equity. We are also, as I mentioned, a professional membership association. So you'll hear more about that. I don't know if it will actually work, but there's a QR code there if you want to become a member, or you want to learn about membership, or you can just go on our website for that. But we are really creating a movement. We need you. So please consider being a member if you're not already. In addition to being a membership organization, or what the Kellogg Foundation calls us the Big Tent for family engagement professionals and parent leaders, we also launched a National Center for Family Math just last year. In fact, we just hired our new director, Dr. Holly Kreider, who was the longtime program officer at the Heising-Simons Foundation. She actually starts in 2 weeks. You'll hear more about that. You can also go on our website, or the QR code is there. If you want to be part of this movement in advancing family math, there's a place where you can just provide your email and contact information, and we'll provide you with that information as well. You know, we don't hear as much about math as we do about literacy. They are both important. In fact, the research says that advancing family math is even more important than advancing family literacy. So this is an area that, you know, and we hear a lot of people say, oh, I'm not very good at math. And that is being imparted on kids. And so they have an attitude that they can't achieve in math. This is something that we're going to really work on to demystify math. Because guess what? Every one of you and every parent is doing math every day, and they don't even know about it. So, right, they're doing recipes, they're going shopping. There are things that they're doing that are actually math activities and don't really know it. So that's something that we're going to be advancing as well. And then this kind of sets us up for the conversation today. And this is about creating the conditions to advance family engagement. Like I said, this is more than public relations. This is more than doing some nice activities in the school so that we can say we did. This is more than checking the box to be in compliance with Title I. This is about, and I'm going to go over these 4 things, this is what we're going to talk about. It's about building the capacity of state education departments to have the expertise and capacity to support school districts and communities. A number of years ago, we didn't have that at all. South Carolina, we have that. We have that expertise and capacity to support. It's about reframing the family engagement conversation. We've done some research, you're going to hear about that, so that what the experts know and the policymakers know is aligned to how the general public thinks and behaves around family engagement. We have an initiative around that. It's about creating a comprehensive hub, a North Star for the field of practice. I'm going to talk to you about that. And finally, and last but not least, it is about higher education institutions piloting and adopting a framework that we're going to talk about today, that we finally have to prepare teachers to engage families before they enter the classroom. So first challenge. Some state education agencies lack the infrastructure, capacity, and expertise to support effective family engagement policy and practice in school districts and communities. And I've already talked a little bit about this, but I want to talk about South Carolina. So 5 years ago, we created a consortium for family engagement with the Council for Chief State School Officers. Council for Chief State School Officers is the association for all of the state superintendents of their state departments of education across the country. Molly Spearman at the time was very involved in CCSSO and was very determined that South Carolina was going to be a part of this first cohort consortium, which I think, we ended up having 18 over 2 cohorts. I think the first consortium, Wendy, I think we had maybe 8 SEAs who were involved in that first consortium, South Carolina being one. And the goal was to create a birth through grade 12 family engagement framework. You saw the key elements of that framework in your warm-up exercise today. That was just an idea 5 years ago. And many of you in this room who raised your hands were part of a co-design process. Because what we said to we were providing TA to the state education departments. What we were saying was, don't create this like often state education departments do, and then push it on people. Bring a diverse coalition together to co-design this with you. Why? Because then they'll co-own it with you. We don't want something that just sits on a bookshelf. And so if you're going to create this framework, it's got to live and breathe. And if you have ambassadors to advance it, that's going to be your best opportunity for that to happen. So we'll talk more about that. But that's what was done 5 years ago. And included in that was something that we did. I'll share this confidential thing with each of you, if we'll keep it between us. We did what we called an opportunity canvas for the South Carolina Department of Ed. And what we did is we just researched policies and practices. We talked to the internal folks at the Department of Ed, and we talked to external folks from across the state of South Carolina. I know the South Carolina PTA was involved in that, a number of community-based organizations. And then we said, here are what the best practices are, and here's where you are, and here's how you can proceed. And since that time, that's exactly what Regina and the team at the South Carolina Department of Education have done. And this just kind of gives you the process that we went through, just like what I talked about. So I'm curious, how many of you know that you actually have legislation for family engagement and education in your state legislature? How many? Raise your hand if you know about the legislation. Okay, so that's more than I thought it was going to be. Because I'll tell you a story. Wendy, you may remember this. When we were doing this research for the opportunity canvas, we said, wait a minute, South Carolina, you've got this great legislation. And some people within the department said, we do? This is what happens with legislation, right? It was from 2000. But guess what? That legislation is relevant today. And of course, now everybody knows about it, and everybody's advancing it. But you have it. So that's just another example. So many states across the country don't have that kind of legislation for family engagement. And it's called the Parental Involvement in Their Children's Education Act. If you don't know about it, I urge every one of you to, is it on the website? Do we know if it's on the website, Regina?
It's on the website.
It's on the website. I urge every one of you to get to know that legislation. Because every one of you should be demanding that legislation is being advanced and that the state is accountable for it. And if and when they are, and I think that they're doing a lot of those things now, thanks to the leadership of Regina and Don and others, that South Carolina is going to continue to lead the way. And this is the framework, right? So you already know about this. Building relationships, communication, linking to families, collaborative practices, and community partnerships. And as I mentioned, there are 18 of these frameworks now across the country. Problem with that is that means that there are 32 states that don't have a framework. But we're making progress because almost no states had a framework 5 years ago. Challenge 2. Research commissioned by NAFSCE, conducted by the Frameworks Institute, shows that when we talk about family and community engagement, often what the public understands is not what we are intending. This is a problem. And so a lot of times we just think that, we're the experts. So we're the ones who, have a love and a passion for this work, and so we know it best. But ultimately that's often not the case. We think what we're saying is actually helping to advance our cause. And what the research says sometimes in communications is we actually do ourselves a disservice because the way we communicate it is in a way that someone who doesn't really know about it may not understand it. So what we did is through this research, we conducted research and with the Frameworks Institute, which is probably the most renowned research communications firm in the country around family, school, and community engagement. And we've launched a Reframing the Conversation initiative, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. And this is kind of what I was talking about before. If everyone knows family engagement is important, then why don't people treat it with the urgency they feel? I often say, while family engagement is common sense, it's not common practice. Why is that? Why is that? I mean, of course we know that families are the experts of their child. So why aren't we leveraging that expertise in strategic ways? So next what I'm going to do is introduce you to a friend and colleague of mine, Nat Kendall-Taylor. He is the CEO of the Frameworks Institute. And I'm just going to play the first video to just kind of give you a sense of what framing is all about.
You have a communications problem. You have a problem of perception. And the problem looks something like this. that you all have been in positions at one time or another where you think you have the most perfect, awesome, slam dunk, whatever sports metaphor you want to use, way of talking about what you do and why it matters. I mean, heck, it works with two of your closest colleagues. What could go wrong when it goes out to normal people, people who don't eat and breathe and your issues all the time? And you find that when this idea that made so much sense to you goes outside of your immediate circle, it does one of two things. So first of all, it lacks resonance. It doesn't have grip. It goes in one ear and out the other. Secondly, probably more unfortunately, because it happens more frequently, I think, that thing which worked and was so brilliant in your own head goes out and it has the exact opposite effect on the people you're trying to persuade, on the people you're trying to communicate with. And I'm not going to ask you to take my word for anything today, right? I'm going to show you evidence from the research that I do with my team that shows this. And I have a lot of pieces of examples, evidence of this you say, they think, this loss in translation effect. I'm going to show you one today that comes from some work that we've done to translate the science of early childhood development. And so people who are in this field, people who are developmental scientists, really want to talk about adversity and stress and the effects that stress and adversity can have on young kids. And they say things like this, that persistent stress can derail development and have negative long-term effects on health and well-being. And if you're a developmental scientist, you replace negative with deleterious because that's the way you talk. And so for folks who are in this field, this is true. There is an incredibly deep body of science across a number of disciplines which supports this point. Unfortunately, when you take this idea out to normal people, to members of the general public, you get things that look and sound like this.
Life's hard. It's supposed to be hard. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. All the bad cliches you can think of. I mean, there's been people that have come from absolutely nothing to make it in whatever society's eyes deem success.
So just to make it really crystal clear, that which you just heard was not the intended effect when this expert opened his or her mouth to deliver this message. The choices that you make as a communicator.
Okay. So to get it, sometimes we think we know and actually we're doing ourselves a disservice. So I want to talk about cultural models. I won't, again, this is not a full-fledged training today, but I do want to touch on some of these things. So there are some things that we should not say that we might think are the best things around family, school, and community engagement. First, we call it the tangible triad. When we talk about parents, teachers, and students, then people think that it's their problem, solely their problem, or they're the issue. Are they key contributors? Absolutely, but it's about systems. It's about supporting their success, what we're going to talk about today. So we don't want to just talk about parents, teachers, and students. We want to talk about school systems and state education departments and leveraging the community because everybody's in it together. That's what we do want to say. What the research also said about family engagement, both from a parent perspective and a teacher perspective, is that people think it's about caring. Now, I'm not going to suggest that caring isn't important. To me, that's the minimum. We want people, if I'm sending my child to school, I want their teacher to care. If they don't care, we're done, right? That's not enough. It's not only about caring, right? It's about competence. It's about understanding how to engage me as a partner in their child's education. By the way, we're not preparing teachers to do that well. It's not the fault of teachers, it's the fault of the system for not preparing them. But that's, and teachers feel the same way about parents. Well, if they come to that school event, that might be at 7 o'clock at night, or it might be at 10 o'clock in the morning when they're working, if they don't come, they must not care about their child. So this whole thing about caring is something that people think about family engagement. That's the very minimum standard. And then finally, certainly we all know that poverty plays a role in families being able to be engaged. Not because families don't want to be, not because families who happen to be dealing with poverty are problems, it's because the system hasn't figured out a way to reach those families. Not because they don't want to be engaged, because the system hasn't figured out how to engage them. So again, that's another thing that often happens is we talk about poverty in ways of let's blame it on poverty for the reason why families aren't involved. And so some of the recommendations that have come out of this research that we are now advancing is, we talk about equity. Well, first of all, 3/4 of the country doesn't really understand what equity is. And what we really decided to define it as is opportunity for all. Each and every American child should have an opportunity to succeed. That's how we're defining this. That's how we are advancing this. Not one versus another. There's not a win-lose proposition here. It needs to be a win-win proposition. That's the narrative that we have to change. Interdependence. This really resonated with teachers. Often teachers feel like the world the burden is on their shoulders solely. And sometimes the narrative has suggested that. We blame teachers when teachers are one element of the strategy to support student success. They cannot do it alone. So what the research was really clear about that we have to communicate is the idea of interdependence. We are all in this together. We need to communicate that to teachers. They need to know that. And when teachers feel that, because there's a school culture that communicates that, when they're connected to parents, when they've got a principal that's supporting their success, when they've got a superintendent that's making sure there's a culture of welcome for families in the district, when they have a state education department that's having summits like this and building the capacity of schools to be effective, then we have an opportunity for the kind of student success that we're looking for. That's interdependence. And then lastly, I'll just talk about this. The metaphor that resonated better than, and all kinds of metaphors were looked at and studied for advancing family engagement. And the metaphor that resonated by far the most, in fact, of the more than 200 reframing initiatives around the world that have been tested, this one was one of the highest accepted metaphors, and it's space launch. The idea, space launch, that, when you think about a space launch, it takes experts, all different kinds of experts, to allow that launch to occur. And that is exactly how we need to be looking at student success and family engagement in education. It's about bringing experts together. And guess what? Families are experts. They're experts on their child. And so that is what we're trying to advance. By the way, some people have said, well, yeah, I like space launch, but I like this better. It's not about what we like. So this is one of these things about this research. It's about understanding how, remember, you say, they think. And so this is what resonates. And so I suggest that you all think about how can you utilize some of this reframing knowledge in your own communications. I want to give an example of some language. So just as a space launch relies on a team of people working together to plan and complete a mission, families, schools, and communities can work together to launch children's learning. This involves planning successful learning by collaborating at the start of the school year. And when families, schools, and communities work together throughout the year on their shared mission, learning takes off. So that's just an example. It's positive, right? It's about people coming together. It's about understanding. It's a collective and bringing together of expertise. This is just another example of reframing in action that I want to just communicate. Notice how this individual totally changes his perspective without even knowing it based on things that are said to him.
So as far as schools and families working together, what would you say that looks like?
There's only so much one can do. There's so many families that you would have to work with, and that'd be a massive overhaul.
How would you say schools and communities work together?
I don't know how I would have communities and schools directly interact, but maybe there should be something there. I don't know.
So I'm curious what you took away from that.
Boom. That's it. That's what I've been saying. Everything's connected. We all work together. Everybody wins. As if we all help each other out. We pull each other's bootstraps.
How would you say that affects children's learning?
I would say it'll be a very healthy relationship because, for one, that everybody's pooling their resources to fuel our future, our children and our future. But at the same time, it shows kids that, hey, if we work together, we can get stuff done. we can make this world just a little bit better every day.
Boom. I mean, that is reframing in action. And so, there's nothing really manipulative about this. This is just communicating family engagement in a way that people can understand and embrace it. And he came to that conclusion himself, right? So nobody's jamming anything down anybody's throat. This is not about a slogan. It's really about helping people understand and think about family engagement the way we do. And so I want to next kind of give an example. Here we are. Of one of our statewide family engagement centers in Ohio that was so excited about this work. They were really one of the leaders of advancing this. They created a video that now states around the country are replicating.
At the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center, we know that Ohio's children succeed when families, schools, and communities work together. Helping our kids succeed is like working at NASA's mission control. Just like a space launch needs astronauts, scientists, and mathematicians to work together, we need schools, families, and communities to work together to help student learning take off. Everybody has a part to play if we want to have a successful launch. When these partnerships are formed, everyone benefits. Teachers are happier with their jobs, have increased confidence, and a better understanding of family and student needs. Students have higher test scores, better attendance, and a more positive attitude towards school. Families feel more supported, have increased confidence in their kids' education, and have better conversations with their kids about school. Our work in the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center is focused on equipping families and educators with what they need to form meaningful partnerships that lead to positive outcomes for all students. So, what do we do at the center? We learn from researchers, educators, families, and other national and state leaders about practices that enhance family engagement. We then take what we've learned and lead the way for the application of these practices by providing tools and trainings to Ohio families and schools for building effective family-school partnerships. To see our work and services, visit our Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center website. We fill our website with resources, trainings, news, and guidance, and stories of effective partnerships from around the state to help schools and families do family engagement well. And we keep adding new resources all the time. You can also keep up to date with us through social media. Check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and our website, and help us launch student success. Get ready for liftoff.
So can you see how you can apply the information in ways that the community can better understand it? That's just another example. Before I get into reframing academies, I understand that there is a white Subaru that's blocking people in. We need you to move your car immediately. So it is the license plate is 4712RG. Everybody close your eyes so that person doesn't have to be embarrassed. No, 4712RG. If you could move your white Subaru.
Thank you.
Okay, so how can South Carolina get involved? I'm going to shamelessly promote our Reframing Academy because we need all of you to be able to have this expertise in being able to communicate this. We've now done this in states across the country. There are communities of practice happening in Connecticut, and Ohio, and Maryland through their departments of education. We've had cities, community school initiatives in Cincinnati who have trained their entire staffs on how to better communicate family engagement. And then also, if you are a NAFSCE member, we're going to do this. We're going to do this at no charge. We want everybody to be able to communicate this. So something, Regina, to think about going forward. This is something that we really want you to be able to do. So, challenge 3. Family-facing professionals, school leaders, educators, family coordinators, after-school providers, etc., receive few opportunities early on or throughout their careers to learn how to partner with families and communities. And so we've done some research on this, and it's concerning. Fewer than 40% of family-facing professionals believe that their pre-service or professional training fully covered core competencies needed to engage families. NAFSCE several years ago was going to advance a credentialing initiative. And when we realized, we brought this committee together, we said, let's have a credentialing initiative, we're going to build the capacity of the field. And then as we got into this, we were realizing, well, credentialing initiative based on what? There's never been a North Star for the field of practice. A set of standards from birth through grade 12 family engagement that really provides that kind of North Star to focus us on what do professionals need to be effective at advancing family, school, and community engagement. And so we took a step back and said, we're going to wait on credentialing. Actually, we're moving forward with that now. This was a few years ago. We're going to wait on credentialing, and we're going to really focus on building a body of knowledge, which became our family engagement core competencies. And actually, I've left a few of these, but this is on our website, so you can either just go on the website, or the QR code is right there, but it's all digital as well. And I want to talk a little bit about that, about these core competencies, a lot of which are connected very much to the framework that South Carolina has. First, our process, to give you a sense. We didn't just kind of create this, we co-designed this. So we started with, as I mentioned, convening our credentialing committee. We moved through and synthesized ideas and themes, and we then vetted them with teachers and faculty. And we then did a crosswalk, you'll see that in a second, of professional standards. And there were I think, 15 different standards for specific audiences in family engagement. Many people may know about the dual capacity framework, but that's not for all audiences. National PTA has standards as well. Head Start has standards, but there aren't really a set of standards that are for across the field. And so this was not to compete with other standards. We wanted to align them. We wanted to make sure that there was a set of core competencies that where these other standards could be very complementary to, but no matter who you were, these core competencies would be ideal for you. And so then after we did the crosswalk of professional standards, we then had key stakeholder conversations, a number of focus groups, and then more than 600 family engagement professionals from across the country who reviewed this and vetted this. And then from that, we made a bunch of changes. So what we presented was not what we ended with. And so, and this just gives you a sense of, these were all the standards that we researched, and then working with a team of fellows from the Harvard Graduate Research, Harvard Graduate Department of Education. We then worked with them to do this crosswalk. And so I want to talk a little bit about what these core competencies are. They are separated into 4 domains with 2 standards in each of the domains, or 2 core competencies within each of the domains. And I heard one group came up here and they were talking about reflecting. I love that, because this is something that we often forget. So these domains are reflect, connect, collaborate, lead. Think about that for a second. Reflect, connect, collaborate, lead. They don't necessarily need to be progressive, but they can be. But when we reflect, we are in a much better position to lead. Leadership without reflection is not necessarily setting you up to have good leadership. And when we reflect, it then impacts how we connect and collaborate as well, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these. So reflect, as I mentioned, is separated into 2 competencies. The first one is respect, honor, and value families. And the second one is embrace equity through family engagement. So understanding our own biases, and when we understand our own, by the way, we all have biases. This is not a politically incorrect thing to say. We are human beings. We all have our own biases, and those biases lead to perspectives and perceptions, and we are who we are. And so when we understand that, then and good or bad, however wherever we came from and however we've been raised, when we understand how we think, then that can inform us or check us on how we connect, collaborate, and lead. And then this, okay, so the next one is connect. Connect, again, building relationships, part of the framework is here in South Carolina. The third standard is building trusting, reciprocal relationships with families. This is not just about checking a box. And I think this is something that's been really challenging in this work, because so often when people think about relationships with families, when schools think about relationships with families, it's about a newsletter. It's about a parent-teacher conference. It's about an ice cream social. Those are great. There's nothing wrong with any of those elements. But when those elements are occurring without intention, strategic intention around building trusting, not just a relationship, a trusting relationship. Imagine if when we talk about defining family engagement, imagine if every teacher, the first thing they did before the school year was to go to a parent's home or meet them in their place of worship or a community center, wherever it was, meeting families where they are, and they said nothing more than, I want to be the best teacher I can for your child. Help me understand your child. Would anyone have a problem with that? Why don't we do that? Automatically, a parent, no matter who they are, no matter their race, their culture, their socioeconomic status, has nothing to do with that. It's about people. All of a sudden saying, wow, this teacher really cares. I mean, this is where it's foundational, right? It's not enough, but it's foundational. They care about my child. I want to help them be the best teacher I can. That's, what building trusting relationship is. And if you have that as a foundation, in my mind, if we were doing that, everything else would probably take care of itself. But because we don't do that, so often that becomes the problem. Or we're in a situation where a teacher doesn't have a trusting relationship with the child, and all of a sudden the child is misbehaving and there's a problem in school, they never talk to that parent. First time a parent hears from that teacher, it's something negative about the child. We get defensive about our kids, right? But if you know that teacher cares first, and now they're talking about something, you're like, wait a second. They're talking, I know this teacher cares about my kid. They're talking to me about this. I need to figure this out, right? Totally different dynamic. We miss the boat there so often. So building relationships, grateful that it's in the South Carolina framework, is so, I think, more profoundly important than anything else. And then fostering community partnerships for learning and family well-being. We need to do that. If families aren't in a good place, if survival is an issue, we can't expect them to be as engaged as we want them to be if they don't have a roof over their head, right? If they're hungry, if they're dealing with a joblessness. So those are things that we have to also, make sure that family support and family engagement go hand in hand. Collaborate. There are 2 standards within collaborate. 5 is co-constructing learning opportunities with families. Again, connected to the South Carolina framework, linked to learning. Co-constructing learning opportunities with families. By the way, co-constructing. So that doesn't mean, as an educator, let me give you a handout of what you have to do. That's okay to do that. But then it's also, let's talk about what we can do together. What do you think we should be doing? What could you be doing at home with your child to help them to be able to achieve these kinds of things? And then 6, linking families and community engagement to learning and development. And then lastly, but certainly not least, lead. So remember I talked about reflecting, we talked about equity and social justice there. Well, that reflection then goes to lead. So 7 is taking part in lifelong learning. So again, I'm going to be shameless because we want all of you to be members of NAFSCE. Being part of a professional association is a way to be part of a larger community. Being part of this summit, being part of a coalition in South Carolina is a way for you all to come together and have a sense of lifelong learning together. And then lastly, advocating for systems change. Working with families to advocate for systems change. Because family engagement and student success doesn't just happen. It happens because we create policies, we have standards, and we have practices to be able to move that forward. It doesn't happen just because. And so that's where, when all of these other pieces are in place, we're advancing for that kind of systems change. Remember when I talked about the tangible triad, it's not about individuals. They certainly have a role to play, but it's about the system supporting those individuals to be successful. And then finally, we have a reflection tool. So again, I urge you to think about how might you begin to use these materials? How might you advocate for change to support family and community engagement? This is really a North Star that everyone can use, whether it's communities of practice that maybe we can do in South Carolina, whether it's simply going online, having your organizations go online, get these core competencies. They are free. It's digital as a way for each of your organizations, school districts, to be able to really, maybe you create your own training around this. We can help you do that. Challenge 4, and something that's really near and dear to me, which is preparing educators. Educators receive few opportunities early on and throughout their careers to learn and practice how to partner with families and communities. And I think, as I mentioned, I think this is perhaps the greatest challenge, because I often say teachers aren't prepared to engage families before the end of the classroom. So why would we think, if they don't have a lot of professional development, that all of a sudden they know how to engage families? And I'll hear teachers say, well, I have a good personality, I'm very outgoing, I'm good at engaging families. Okay, but it's not about just being outgoing. I mean, what if you're an introvert? Does that mean you can't engage families? No, but it's about having the skills to do that. And let me say, when we talk about meeting families where they are, it's not that families that are dealing with poverty or family are not reachable. We haven't figured out how to reach them. That's a system issue, right? That's a skill set. So if you don't have any skills to do that, then guess what happens with those families who are experiencing poverty? Those families that might not have resources. The system, we haven't prepared very few teachers to do it well. If there are complexities, that just exacerbates the problem. So it's not the problem of communities of poverty, it's the problem overall of the system, and then it's exacerbated when there are complexities. And that's what our challenge is. So why focus on preparing educators for family and community engagement? Again, research is clear about this. It strengthens student achievement, it advances equity, it bolsters teacher quality, it enhances culturally relevant, responsive, and sustaining teaching, and it supports recruitment, retention, and diversification of the teaching workforce. So we've done some studies, and this is department heads across the country in educator preparation programs, schools of education. And what we determined was 51% of department heads reported at least one class in family engagement. Now, that's not a dedicated class. That's just that there was a class that included family engagement. That might include an organization coming in for one class to promote it. I mean, we didn't have that go to that level of detail, but that means 50% of department heads are suggesting there's not even a class at all that's integrating family engagement. That means half of our teacher candidates are not necessarily prepared at all. Only 47% of pre-K to 12 educators agree or strongly agree that they were properly prepared to engage families. And 64% agree that their school provides them with professional learning. Now, we didn't go to what the quality of the professional learning was. That means 1/3 aren't getting anything. Research is clear that even if a higher education institution prepares a teacher, they often, within 3 years, if a school is not reinforcing that, they often lose or forget what they learned. So this is really a challenge that we need to tackle. And so what did NAFSCE do? We put together, as I mentioned earlier, what we call the pre-service consortium on educator preparation. We had 15 or 16 states that applied to be part of this. South Carolina was one of our 7 states that worked with us. We have a dream team of partners that including the American Association for colleges and teacher education, AACTE, the NEA, one of the large teachers unions, the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium, and the Council for the Accreditation of Educator Preparation, CAPE. And they are the accrediting body of SEAs in higher education around standards for preparing educators, and they are the accreditor here in South Carolina. And then, as I mentioned, these were the teams. In South Carolina, it included the South Carolina Department of Ed, Claflin University, and the University of South Carolina. So I talked to you about the one study around the National Survey of Colleges and Universities Preparing Educators. But we also did a study of states. That was actually the first report that we did. And what it determined was the large majority of states, and this was looking at policies within SEAs across the country, the large majority of SEAs at this time, which I want to say is 2019, did not have policies that were advancing best practice family engagement. Again, you actually have legislation here in South Carolina that's unique. Most states don't actually have that. And then lastly, this study, we then did a study with family-facing professionals around how prepared they were, which I just shared some of those studies. And so, that was back in January of 2020, when James Ritter and Anthony Pittman of Claflin and Michelle Myers of the University of South Carolina. Is Anthony here, by the way? No, he's not here yet. But James, you're here. Helped us really think about this work, and it resulted in what we call the Educator Preparation Framework for Family and Community Partnerships. This is on our website as well. So there are a few of these that I left for the superintendent and the deputy superintendent and a few others, but you can get this on our website. What this is all about is reimagining how we're preparing teachers to engage families. So I want to just talk a little bit about, what this is all about. So this includes promising practices. This includes recommendations. And this really is the framework right here. So it starts with, what are our core beliefs and values? And I'm not going to get into it because I don't have a lot of time right now, but I urge you to really look deeply at this. And then from the core beliefs and values, who are the partners in this work? And you'll notice families and communities are partners in this work. So this is about how are we bringing families in to inform teacher preparation? Are they part of classes? Are teaching candidates engaging with families as part of their coursework? State education agencies, they play a key role, right, in policies and setting standards around educator preparation. And then schools and districts, they play a role in policies and practices and making sure that even if colleges have prepared teaching candidates for the classroom, that is there ongoing work that's happening. And then from there, we look at what we call the levers for change. And these are the levers for change that we think are so important. You need money. You need mandates, measuring, and monitoring, right? We want to monitor our success. You need the methods. How are we doing this? What are the vehicles? Are we actually thinking big? Are we reimagining what this can be in a way that teachers are ideally prepared to engage families? And then we should be celebrating our success, which is what we're partially doing today, through messaging, marveling, and motivation. And then that leads to outcomes, key outcomes which lead to impact, and ultimately the impact is interconnected educator preparation partnerships. All educators are prepared, and family and community engagement, aligned with NAFSCE's vision, is universally practiced. So we launched that framework in December of 2022. And we immediately then in January moved to innovating this framework. So we wanted to have small innovations. So we worked with our Dream Team partners, AACTE, and AACTE is actually the association for all the colleges for teacher education. So, or many of them, maybe not all of them, but many of them. And so we worked with them and the NEA to disseminate an RFP to colleges to participate in this, a small grant initiative, I think $15,000, to innovate this framework, elements of the framework. We didn't know what we were going to get. We ended up getting 76 schools of education submitting applications. We only had funding for 5. We ended up finding funding for 9. And then these are the states that were where schools of education were included in implementing innovative parts of this framework. And it's separated into 4 areas: coursework, clinical experience, program redesign, and systems change. And again, if you go on the website, you can see some of the universities who are involved: Bank Street, the University of Tennessee, Michigan State, the state of Colorado, the Department of Ed has put together a consortium of states. And in South Carolina alone, they're doing innovations because thanks to the leadership of the Department of Ed and Claflin and the University of South Carolina, they're already doing some work in this. In fact, I want to mention there is a journal article that is in your program. Is that correct, James? In the program. Again, South Carolina is leading the way in this. That speaks to a study that they did of teaching candidates here in South Carolina. And so there's a journal article that you can read about that goes to this study. And what I'll simply say is it's not a huge sample size. I want to say 109 students, 109 teaching candidates. But what the numbers say is they are far more prepared than the national average. So you should celebrate that. And again, that's thanks to the leadership of our pre-service consortium who's really leading the way. We have a lot more work to do. Let me be clear about that. But thanks to the leadership here in South Carolina, you are all doing great work. And so we then followed up this grant initiative with a symposium for family engagement that we brought, for educator preparation, hosted at the NEA, where we brought together influencers in this work. So we had SEAs, we had national education associations, we had the U.S. Department of Education, we had statewide family engagement centers. We really wanted to bring together those influencers and leaders in the work to help to reimagine this. And it was a phenomenally, it was just a phenomenal event on March 30th of this past year. And I have a video that I want to share. And Anthony Pittman of Claflin is in a few places in this video because he was leading sessions, etc. So I want to just play it for you. Welcome to the first Educator Preparation Symposium for Family and Community Engagement. Today is a celebration of collective thinking, grounded in research around a systemic approach to preparing educators to engage families as true partners in their child's education.
How do you connect with families? How do you bridge the gap?
What is it I am going to do today to be a part of the solution?
How do we reduce barriers, right, to getting teachers in the classroom?
Are you building any connections? Yes or no? Did the family walk away with a new skill? Yes or no?
What's happening right now requires us to think differently.
That's a having more resources to get folks the time in communities.
Inclusive, safe education.
Families are the critical voice for their own children. We believe the life of every child matters.
That the work we are doing right now is absolutely critical.
Becky Pringle,
developing those critical thinkers and those collaborative problem solvers that we need to not only protect our democracy, but to ensure the future of this country.
You can learn from others, and there's plenty of others like you in your states and in your country.
Be patient, work systematically is another lesson that I have learned.
To be in the room with all of the people who could, if they keep working together, and I'm confident they will, could really get this off the ground is just a thrill.
You're making sustainable change. You're building a reimagined system. You're transforming teacher-family partnerships. You're doing amazing things. So together, let's get to work.
Yes, it takes everybody, but everybody is rowing together in the same direction. Thanks to Vito and the NAFSCE team. And so can we just take a moment both to marvel and applaud NAFSCE?
So in closing, I thought I would play for you the introduction that Secretary Miguel Gartona of the U.S. Department of Education provided to our symposium guests.
Thank you, Becky, for that introduction. And thank you to the NEA, AACTE, CAPE, and the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement for coming together to create and host this symposium. As a father and as a teacher, I couldn't believe more strongly in your mission, preparing teachers to engage with families effectively. I'm reminded of a great episode of the TV show Abbott Elementary. And I know everyone in the crowd has seen this show. So Gregory, a first-year teacher, notices something. One of his first graders always arrives an hour late to class. He tries and he fails to get the attention of the boys' mother. So he asks the advice of the most senior teacher in the school, Barbara Howard. If you've seen it, you know how the situation has a happy ending. Basically, Barbara guides Gregory to have a real conversation with the student's mother. She tells him why she's bringing her son in late. He explains what the student is missing because of that. And they realize one really important thing that I think across the country we need to say loud and proud. We're on the same team. They both want the child to learn and do well. That story highlights a simple truth. Sometimes the best way to help a student is an effective relationship between teachers and family members. Look, as a fourth grade teacher myself, I knew before I taught curriculum, I had to make connections. And those connections with the families were critical. They know their children better than I did. So I needed to work with them on a shared goal of helping their children succeed. Here's the problem. Too many teachers who are just getting started don't have a superhero like Barbara Howard to show them how you can work with families. And too many teachers feel totally unprepared to do that work. Whether it's in the teacher preparation programs or colleges and universities or well into their careers, teachers are often missing out on getting what they need to engage effectively with families. That's why NAFSCE's work matters so much. You're reimagining what's possible, a system where effective family engagement skills and strategies are universally practiced in schools and embedded in teacher preparation everywhere. And crucially, you're making it happen through intentional collaboration. I use that word a lot, intentional collaboration. We have to be intentional and deliberate about collaborating well with states, with communities, with philanthropic organizations. You are raising the bar. Your work also reinforces something that should be pretty obvious. Teachers want to partner with families, and they want to know how to do that well. So to those who are peddling this false narrative that pit teachers against parents, I say, stop making teachers the enemy. Our children need our teachers and families to work together. I can tell you as a parent of two students who are one in high school, one in college, that connection still matters. Teachers and parents may be different superheroes with different superpowers. Let's be clear though, they're on the same team. Together, they're the Avengers of helping our students thrive. All of you at the symposium today have had the chance to take bold actions that make a team of superheroes even stronger. That leads to more funding, more expertise, more collaboration. But what you're doing isn't some shiny new initiative that'll disappear after a few years. You're making sustainable change. You're building a reimagined system. You're transforming teacher-family partnerships. You're doing amazing things. So together, let's get to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure speaking to you today. I wish you well with the rest of your session.